Hello, welcome to MarketBeat Monday. We are glad that you are joining us live today. This is our weekly live edition where we have two of our regular analysts on to give a little update on some of the hottest things happening in the market right now. We'll cover a few stocks that we prepared to talk about, and then we're just going to dive into the chat. We have a lot of viewers who've joined us before on MarketBeat Mondays who will just throw out names of stocks they want to hear about, and our analysts who are joining us live today will just go over them live. They have a cold look at some of the stocks. They'll take a quick look at the charts and then give a quick analysis of what's happening. So it's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. We'll go about 45 minutes or so right now. So joining us today to dive right into what's happening in the market and the biggest market movers today and this week are MarketBeat analysts Chris Markoch and Thomas Hughes. Guys, we love having you here. Thank you so much for being here again on another MarketBeat Monday. Right now, let's start with the biggest topic. It's what everyone is talking about, and that's the geopolitical issues, that big Russian-Ukraine meeting, all of the talks the president has been having with these two countries over the past few days. What's the market feeling about that right now?
I think hopeful, right? It'd be good to see a deal. War is bad, generally speaking. We want to see an end to the hostilities for sure.
I mean, the market didn't do much today. I was just telling you, Bridget, before we went on, it looked like everything was pretty much flat for the day. So I think there's a lot of anticipation about what might come out of this. But again, there's just a lot that we don't know. And I think until we get more clarity, it's going to be hard for investors to decide where they want to be putting their money right now. But certainly I agree with Thomas. An end to this is better than what's been going on.
Yeah, I'm curious to see, has the VIX done anything with just this, any talks of potential tensions? I'm wondering that fear, that kind of pause where the market didn't do much of anything today,
The VIX was
makes
down
sense when
today.
we have that uncertainty.
The VIX looks to me like it's, in the near term trending lower. It's certainly moving sideways at very low levels, in alignment with, bull market conditions. Potential for it to spike at any time. Something could happen, but right now the VIX looks pretty good to me.
Very good. I wanted to cover a couple of other things really quick before we get into some names here. And that was, before we started, we were talking a little bit about what could these geopolitical discussions, what could this mean for the market? Part of this is talking about what's happening today, what's happening right now, but also what could be happening this week. So as we have these talks unfold, what could we expect in the market this week, one way or another?
Well, I think, just speaking about the peace talks, peace possibility, on the one hand, you think there'll be, with less fighting, there'll be less spending on defense. But on the other hand, there'll be increased confidence and potentially increased, economic activity with rebuilding. So those two things are possibly a wash. But then if you add in the possibility, Ukraine gets like NATO protection, then there's going to be even more money kind of going their way in the defense, sector vector. So that could help, sustain defense spending and just generally be a good for the economy at whole, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing, Chris, just to throw in there is we talked a lot about defense stocks when the tensions were higher with Israel. Whenever any of these geopolitical issues come up, defense stocks seem to be getting a little bit of a pop. I'm wondering if we're seeing that right now or if that's just one area to watch for this week.
It looks like we've got some positive action last week and a little bit today. Kind of flattish. Generally speaking, I'm still bullish on defense stocks because there's a healthy tailwind of spending.
Yeah.
The government spending is supposed to rise. There's rearmification, there's modernization, technology, AI is all part of it. So I think defense spending, generally speaking, is going to be good, and I think that these are pretty good stocks to own. So, if you're interested in them, just wait for them to pull back, look for good, target levels and expect them to trend higher over time because of the cash flows and dividends and share repurchases.
Right.
Good. Well, moving on from the geopolitical issues to another topic and a stock now. I want to get to Intel stock because this is a really interesting story. Late last week, we saw Intel really have a nice little pop, and then there was that interesting news that came out and kind of moved the stock in a different direction just today. Chris, what's behind that move in Intel?
So the Trump administration is reportedly in talks with Intel have an arrangement in which the U.S. government would take a 10% stake in Intel. Details are obviously very sketchy, other than just that headline of the 10% stake. Don't exactly know what that would all entail. And I think that's the market was digesting that today, and Intel was down a little bit today, but it's been up. It's been up for the last 5 days. So we'll see if that was primarily just because of this move. I don't know. It actually looked like it dropped sharply around noon today, but it's kind of come back a little bit. So
Intel is one of those names that I think is just interesting to keep bringing up, because I feel like for almost the last year, we've had conversations about, is now the time to buy Intel? There's a lot of construction happening. This is going to come through. This company's going to see a turnaround. Thomas, Chris, what are your thoughts on, is there a turnaround potential for Intel? Is now a time to look at getting into this stock? Could this run up go even higher?
I think that there's potential for Intel. I mean, it's got headwinds, it's struggling, but it's still pretty fundamental to semiconductor manufacturing globally. I've been reading more and more about its criticality to the U.S. infrastructure, semiconductor infrastructure. So this play is really one for national security. And I was just thinking that 10% stake is probably enough for the government to get a seat on the board. So then we'll have like some influential, like the government really saying like, hey, this company that's important for national security, we're going to start influencing its direction, and possibly, spurring its, domestic manufacturing expansions, long-term, business outlook. There's a lot of positives for this, I think, but there's also still a lot of questions, as Chris has been saying.
Yeah.
Well, that's a
there's no question that, the Trump administration wants to get chip manufacturing in the United States. And it would seem that right now, the current deal that's already there for Intel to start building is a logical way to approach that. So,
yeah, we'll have to see what happens with this one.
Yep.
All right, well, that's a good look at Intel. We're going to get to some of the names coming up in the chat. I love to see all the comments coming in with the stocks that you want us to talk about. We're going to get to some of those in a minute. We've got just a couple of other names to talk about really quick, and one is kind of a whole sector. I wanted to talk a little bit about some movement that we're seeing in the home building sector. This sector has been essentially dead for almost the whole last year.
Yeah.
And in just the last few weeks, we're starting to see some movement in home building stocks. Definitely not anywhere near the highs that they had been at. But I want to talk about the catalyst behind that. And that's, of course, all the talk about rate cuts. At this point, it's pretty much every investor thinks it's almost a certainty that this is going to happen. Is that the only reason we're seeing kind of a resurgence in these home building stocks?
I think it has a lot to do with it, because, lower interest rates should hopefully unstick the housing market. But as we were discussing before we began shooting, 25 basis points is pretty incremental. It's not really a whole lot. It's not going to, cause a flood of buyers. It's certainly not going to spur me to sell my house, because the numbers are still way out of whack as far as like, my house value, the next home that we're going to buy, the where interest rates are. I mean, they're still pretty high. But I think over time, the trajectory is for them to fall. So that is good for the housing stocks. So I would caution that maybe the rally that we've seen recently won't continue much higher, but that we are seeing a bottom in the market, and to continue watching for positive developments.
Yeah, Chris, any of your thoughts on some of the home builders out there? I'm just going to pull up some charts and a few names in this sector that we've seen. D.R. Horton is one of the names where we saw a really nice little rally in this stock. Is still, up pretty well today. What are your thoughts on whether or not that this rally could go even higher and get us back to the highs that we saw last year?
I think it's a long-term play. So some of the activity you're seeing in stocks like D.R. Horton and Lennar specifically were because on Friday it came out that Berkshire Hathaway had made purchases of both of those stocks in the second quarter. I say Berkshire because people instantly go to Warren Buffett, but with Buffett stepping away at the end of the year, I think this is more of a Berkshire-driven play right now. And, they're going to follow still some of Warren Buffett's investing principles, and this is definitely a long-term play. As Thomas and I were talking about it, a quarter point by the Fed's not going to do much, but if that quarter point turns into 50 basis points or 75 basis points by the end of this year, beginning of next year, and then you've got the Fed chair going to be replaced early next year, then you could start seeing there be more momentum in the housing market and in the home builder market. So, I mean, Berkshire's making a long-term play in this, and they're just deciding the sector was sold off enough and it was time to jump in.
Right. And I want to bring up a point too that it's possible the market is mispricing rate cuts. I mean, they're certain that there's going to be 125 basis point cut at the next meeting in a month, and probably two by the year's end. But that's assuming things that aren't really happening yet.
Yeah.
We're not in a recession yet to spur them to act, and inflation is still pretty high to keep them from acting. As we've said before, I think that there's a lot of risk in them making any moves right now because a lot of these changes we're seeing in inflation and economic activity are related to policy, so we got to wait for these policies to play out. We got to see how tariffs finish out. And also we've got the PCE price index next week, and we're going to have at least one more CPI and maybe another PCE before the next Fed meeting. So there's a lot of chances for inflation to keep ticking higher, right? Because the last report wasn't that good. Core PCE was what?
PCE.
3.1%. It was up 0.2. I think the whispers feared an even bigger number, but still rising by 0.2% does not tell me that the Fed is going to start cutting rates, especially when labor markets are still kind of solid. There was some weakness in the job gains data, but that's all in the revisions. The trends are positive. The initial claims data has been pretty positive. The total claims data is trending at very healthy levels. So there's really not a lot of reason for me to think that the Fed is going to cut rates.
I think that's a really important point to bring up, and a good cautionary outlook, because I see more and more investors talking about this is all but certain, this is all but going to happen. But I think that's a good cautionary look at this of wait to see if there's too much of this getting priced in, because it's not a sure thing yet. Good point, Thomas.
Right.
Really good look.
Still got 30 days. Yeah, because just a couple of weeks ago, the CME was showing a high percentage chance of having 3 rate cuts. That was up from only being 1, and now it's down to 2. This thing changes a lot. There's a lot of moving parts right now. So really, I would not bet for sure that there's going to be a cut this time.
Yeah, I want to hear from you guys out there. If you're watching this right now, do you think a rate cut is a certain thing? Are you absolutely playing this by ear and saying, no, we're just going to see what happens? What do you think about the rate cut situation and how much it could impact the market? Let me know in the chat what you're thinking. All right, we're going to move on to one other stock that we talked about ahead of time because it had some good movement today, and that's Duolingo. I think this came up last week in MarketBeat Monday. There's already some moves happening last week a little bit, and it's up about 12.5% in 5 days, so still doing fairly well, definitely not to its all-time highs. But what's behind the move in this stock?
Yeah, the move here, Bridget, it has to do with AI, and in this case, there was a lot of concern heading into this year that Duolingo, which is it's a learning company, right? It's a company that does learning software, and there was concern that AI was going to make the company irrelevant, because why would you use a platform like Duolingo when you can just ask ChatGPT or ask Perplexity or whatever? And what has been found out, especially in the company's latest earnings report, which was in early August, is that that's really not the case. In fact, the company is finding ways to make AI its ally and not an adversary, and that's changed sentiment on the stock. It's really that, as far as I can see, it's that simple. Is there's a lot more optimism about where the stock can go now as it's finding a way to integrate AI into its platform and making it more user friendly in that regard.
Very good. Any thoughts, Thomas, on the chart action for this one? It's still not up to where it was even earlier this month.
Right.
There's been quite a bit of volatility in this chart. Anything in the chart that you want to talk about?
Well, it looks like the market's in an uptrend. It's pretty volatile. Right now, we've definitely pulled back. There are some signs of resistance at the moving average, but equally there are some signs of support at this critical level. Looks like we could see a rebound happening, certainly set up to see one. If we start seeing some more upward traction and a move above the 370 level, it could easily get back to 450 or 500 by the end of the year, I think.
Yeah, I've got the consensus price target pulled up right now, and on the high side, it's a 575. So that could be a lot of upside if that analyst rating is anywhere near reality for that one.
Let's
All
look
right.
at
Well,
the
now, guys,
trend.
I'm going to start giving us some names of some tickers to look into right now. There's a
Okay.
lot of really interesting names coming up. I've been looking at the chat and looking up some of this. The first one to look up is RMBS. This is Rambus. I'm going to have both of you talk about that one. And then the next one we're going to get to is Ranger Energy Services. This is RNGR. So we've got two names. I'm just going to pull up the analysis that we have on Rambus right now. This
All
is
right.
a semiconductor products in the US, South Korea,
Right.
Singapore, international.
Totally. So
And there's
Rambus
been
makes
some good
memory.
movement on this one.
Right. Rambus makes memory chips. I haven't looked at this company recently specifically, but I know if I'm looking at Micron and some other memory makers that the legacy markets are normalizing. There's still some headwinds there, but we're returning to growth in many of those end markets. But also AI has been very strong for this group. So let's see, RMBS. Do they make HBM memory? Let's see here. Right. So Rambus is making HBM products, which is really critical to AI. So what I think we're seeing here is Rambus being reinvigorated by AI and its position in the memory market.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it looks like a really good run up for the stock recently. I was just looking into the short interest to see if we're seeing a lot happening right there. This is not a name we've come up on the channel very much. Have either of you covered it often on marketbeat.com?
It's been quite a long time for me, but I am familiar with them.
Good.
Looks
Yeah,
like.
I'm letting Thomas carry this one because I'm not.
Oh.
It's not one that I've covered before.
All right. So looking at the analyst trends, MarketBeat's tracking 8 and it's unanimous at a buy. Price target assumes fair value at today's close, but the trends show the price target is increasing after having dipped a little bit earlier in the year. So we certainly have some market support. Recent revisions are leading to the high end range, so we've got some support. This stock could keep moving higher. Right now, it looks like it's testing resistance at previous all-time highs. We move above that and get a close above that level. This could continue to move up to the high end of the range, which is near $90.
Yeah, that's a good breakout stock. Thank you for bringing it up. We had a couple of different people in the chat talk about this one, so that was a good one to bring up. Next, we're going to move to a little pocket of energy stocks. So we'll start with Ranger Energy Services, but then Thomas, we're going to cover a couple. This is one of the earlier comments wanted to know about some nuclear stocks, and some of them are your favorite. We're going to talk about NuScale. Wanted to talk about Oklo as well. And then nano nuclear energy, NNE. So those are three different nuclear stocks that we want to just give a quick overview on. So Thomas will talk about that soon. Chris, did you have time to look up Ranger Energy Services?
I did. So this is a company that so they're a servicing company for oil fields. They're an oil field service company, and it's kind of interesting. So I would guess that some of the interest in this stock is due to the fact that the United States is obviously doing more in terms by way of drilling and stuff like this. It's actually kind of interesting because I just wrote an article today where I was talking about there's an assumption right now that oil prices are going to be lower and may even be trending lower than they are now. And so my article took the other side of that and said, what if that thesis is wrong? And what if the demand story might turn out to be a little bit stronger than expected? And that would be the case if you're going to be looking at Ranger. That's what you're hoping for, is that demand story is going to be stronger and that you would see more demand for the oil field services, because those contracts tend to be longer lasting and have some run to them. So I see the stock's been doing, it's down 17.5% year to date, but it's up strongly in the last 3 months. And in the last month specifically, it's up about 10.5%. So my guess would be that's where the interest in the stock is coming from. And, for what it's worth to people that are believing the bullish case there, I kind of support it too, because I can kind of see a scenario where demand for oil may be a little stronger than what people are expecting.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. Just looking at that
Yeah.
chart of it, it had that big pop and a little bit of a pullback, but there could be more room to run for this one. So thank you for
Yeah.
bringing that one up too. Different part of energy. We're going to switch gears and talk about nuclear now and just kind of rapid fire through those three different companies. I know these are companies, Thomas, you talk about quite often. Start with Oklo because I know this is one that you've mentioned multiple times as being just a really good concept for a company that should do pretty well. It does look like it's getting hit a little bit in the last 5 days.
Right. Well, I think right now the price action in Oklo and NewScale are kind of not tied together, but the same factors. The recent earnings reports were really good and affirmed this improving outlook for their timelines and their timeline to reactor deployment and revenue. But they didn't amplify it, so it gave the market a reason to sell off. Right now, they're both no revenue companies, but we're looking towards revenue beginning within the next few years. They're both well capitalized, certainly a favorable regulatory environment. So to me, these pullbacks are going to turn into buying opportunities. It's just a matter of how deep they get and what the market does once the rebound begins.
Yeah, I've got the chart up right now, and it looks like that last dip in July, we're just about to that point where we saw it pop back up when looking at the chart. So it seems like this could be a bottom, or it could go even further. Any thoughts about is now the pullback that you're looking for to get in on these?
The new scale chart to me looks a little bit more attractive as far as the pullback entry because it has corrected to a deeper level. Oklo is showing a little bit more support. It may not pull back as far as SMR's pull back, but right now I have not seen a bottom confirmed. But looking at the Oklo chart right now, it looks like one could be confirmed here pretty soon. But if it doesn't, we could possibly fall from the 68.70 level down to about maybe 55, 53, 55 before finding the next support level.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring it up just because it was one of the other names mentioned, and I don't think we've really talked about this one much. The nano nuclear energy, the NNE.
Right.
Is that one you've covered before, Thomas?
It isn't, but y'all can look for me to pitch it to the editorial team and try to get one on the get one on track. It looks interesting. NNE is another small reactor company, but they make micro reactors, which are even smaller than the small modular reactors. They do about 20 megawatts. So it would be, more portable, easier to construct, easier to deploy, plenty of applications. So I'm interested to dig into that one and see what the outlook is. But I assume it's the same. I assume that they're on track for regulatory approvals, that the red tapes are being cleared away. Funding should be pretty abundant, and there should be some demand for their product.
Yeah, looking at upside right here too, it looks like this one has, based on the consensus price target, has a decent amount of upside too, and is ranked as a moderate buy. So that's an interesting company. Thanks for bringing that one up. All right, now it's to decide where to go next. There's a lot of different names coming in, so I'm going to just go off of a few that I'm seeing right away. We've got one for Virgin Galactic, SPS or SPCE. This is a different one. I've not seen this one before, so I'm just going to pull it up really quick. And then we've got another name we're going to throw out there is TTD. I'll have you guys look up both of those so we have some time to look at it. I just got Virgin Galactic pulled up. This is a smaller stock for sure.
Right.
Just the $3 range. And it says it's an aerospace and travel company. Focus.
Sir Richard Branson, it's his play on space. I think that it's really struggling, right? Because they don't really go to space that I know of. They really just do these high orbit flights. So you're kind of being in space. It's more of a space tourism play than it is on a real space enterprise play.
Yeah, this is interesting. I don't think I've seen a chart before that had so much red at the top there in the price performance section. So there's a lot of a downtrend for this stock for sure, but you have seen a couple little pops this year, which is interesting. At the rate it's at now, is it a chance? It's not gone much lower than this before. Is there a chance for some growth, or is there really no potential for this company?
The company's suspended. Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
I'm not saying there's no potential, but it looks like the market has a very low confidence in that potential.
Yeah, I mean, the companies, they were doing, as Thomas said, their space tourism, and they suspended the flights that they were doing late last year. They're saying that they're going to start flights with a new space plane possibly by the end of next year, but that's not necessarily confirmed. Um, you know, to me, it's a lottery ticket. I would stay away from it, but I would have stayed away from it in its previous, orientation, and I would certainly be staying away from it now. It's a space stock, but it's on the tourism side of it, and there doesn't necessarily seem to be much of a bullish story there right now. It seems more like it could fall into that meme stock category.
Right. I know that the recent reverse stock split doesn't really bode well. Just historically speaking, the stocks that do reverse splits just continue to, burn capital and flail about and go nowhere but down.
That's a good look at that company, a good brief look anyway into what that company's doing right now. Let's get to TTD, Trade Desk. Either of you covered this one before?
I have, not recently, but I'm familiar with why the stock dropped so sharply, and that was after its earnings report. So if we're looking at the Trade Desk, compare the Trade Desk to something like Meta Platforms or like Alphabet. So those companies take a walled garden approach to advertising. That obviously, like when you're in their ecosystem, you're in their ecosystem, and they control what ads you see. They control that environment, and that's why it's called a walled garden. And some people really like it. One of the best examples of that is Apple. When you're in their ecosystem, you're in their ecosystem. The Trade Desk takes a different approach to it, called programmable advertising, where they're basically trying to match you, the user, with ads that you're more likely to react to based on based on where you're clicking and where you're doing this. And for right now, it looks like the walled gardens are winning, and that's why the Trade Desk is not doing well. That's a short and sweet as I can make it, Bridget. But that's kind of what's going on with stock right now. Is their version, their platform, their way of doing advertising is just not they're losing out to companies like Meta and Alphabet right now.
Interesting. I think what stands out to me, just looking at a cold look at this stock, is when you pull up the analyst ratings, you see a 61% upside, and right now it's trading, closer to the low analyst estimate on this one, well below the average, and nowhere near the high. So I think that can be tempting for investors to look at that and see that there's this potential there.
It can be, but I would caution them, because if you look at some of the analyst activity since the earnings report, it's been bearish. UBS dropped their price from 105 down to 80, which is still pretty good. But then Jefferies dropped their price from 100 all the way down to 50. So you're seeing some analysts get very bearish on the stock.
Yeah, that's a really good point for that one for sure. Thank you, guys. All right, well, let's move to a couple more familiar names. And this one I know you'll be able to talk about right away. Cisco Systems. The question with this one is, why do we see this one dropping when the earnings were good, when they had a good report? So I don't know if either of you covered this after the report. I'll pull up the chart right now. Looks like we had a pretty decent drop off in the last few days.
Let me refresh. That was last week. Let me just refresh myself with what's going on.
Yeah, this one still has a decent upside too. And then look at the chart.
I agree with the intent of the question, which is just, this was a really good report. It had plenty to like. Business supported by AI, but also by normalization and resumption of growth in end markets. Profitability was good. Cisco was certainly one of the blue chip stocks that I like to watch for buybacks and capital returns, things of that nature. So I think that maybe the analysts were looking for some more. They weren't really inspired by the report. I think that MarketBeat is showing a little bit of negative activity.
Yeah. It looks like they didn't like the guidance, Thomas, from what I'm seeing.
Well, see, I thought the guidance was good. That's what I'm remembering. That's what I've... But again, just not wowing. But again,
Right.
this is like, kind of expected strength and a good solid stock didn't provide a catalyst for rallying, so we're selling off right now. But I think that this report and the outlook still aligns with the uptrend, which is supported by the cash flow and the capital returns. So certainly one that I would be looking to buy on the dip.
Yeah, because the valuation doesn't look that stretched. It's like 21 times earnings.
Totally.
So,
I think,
for a tech
this
stock, I mean, that's
very, very cheap for a blue chip tech stock that is,
yeah,
becoming central to AI. You got to think all of these data centers that are being built with all these NVIDIA GPUs and
right.
servers made by the second tier companies, and they're being connected together by Cisco infrastructure. All these networks are being built with Cisco infrastructure, so they're just well supported by the long-term outlook for tech upgrades, the next generation technologies that are all coming down the pipe.
This is a good question that's kind of coming up. Is this seems to be a trend? There's a couple of people in the chat saying we're seeing several companies that had really strong earnings and still are seeing a pullback right now, even just a
Yeah.
week post a really strong earnings. The two other names we want to look into here are AEVA, Avia Technologies, and then we also want to look at MicroStrategy, which both apparently had the stronger earnings report and are still seeing a pullback. I've got MicroStrategy pulled up now, so we can start there. This one's down 7% in 5 days, down almost 14% on the
Right.
month. And a look at earnings really quick shows, positive, doing well. Any further insight? I'll give you a couple more seconds to really
Right.
look at what's going on there.
So like MicroStrategy, I wouldn't really call a good strong report because their core business really is still just not doing very much. But what they did report was a more efficient conversion of shareholder value into Bitcoin. All right. So they're diluting value to raise their money, and they did it more efficiently. So they were able to get more Bitcoins for the money that they spent. They're still building their Bitcoin repository. There's still tons of questions about how they're going to make profits down the road, other than just eventually to start selling the Bitcoins, which, just reverses what they've been doing. So yeah, to me, MicroStrategy really is a stock to be wary of. And right now, the price action on the monthly chart especially is showing some pretty toppy action, with the top around 425. So I'm not really expecting to see it move much higher without some kind of really bullish fundamental change in the outlook.
Good. All right, we're going to get to, I want to give you the other two names. Well, Chris, maybe you can look into Avia right now. Avia
I am.
Technologies
Yeah,
is the
I'm looking
next
at that.
one. And then I want to look at two, Mara, MARA, and CLSK as well, just to look at those that both apparently had some good earnings and are seeing a pullback right now. I'll pull up those charts in just a second too. But let's get to Avia.
CSK,
Yeah.
CSK, you said?
CLSK.
So yeah, Bridget, I can dive into a little bit about Avia, and I'm not sure if that's actually how it's pronounced. Ticker symbol AEVA. So this is a company that's in the lidar business, so that gets us into the autonomous vehicle space. What it looks like here, Bridget, I think I understand where people would be a little confused because the company did post strong year-over-year revenue gains in its last quarter. However, the company's still not profitable. Autonomous driving, while it is gaining steam, it's still in its early stages. I think this is a case of a stock that just got out ahead of its skis a little bit. It's up 180. It's up 180% now, and that's after a very strong pullback. So I think this is just a case of a stock that got ahead of itself, and investors were just looking for, or I shouldn't say they were looking for, but if you give investors any reason to take some profit, you got it when the year-over-year revenue grew, but their earnings got farther away from break even. So that's what I think this is. It's a speculative stock. It's a speculative stock in a hot area, so you could make that argument. But I think this is just a case of a stock that just got out ahead of itself, and it was due for a pullback, and that's what it's getting from the market right now. And I think, Bridget, that's kind of an answer that I could give in general to that general question of why some stocks have been posting strong earnings, but they've been getting beaten down on the internet after the earnings report. It's just there is a sense that the market in general is overbought, and so companies are going to have to not just deliver in earnings, they're going to have to be really strong in earnings. Otherwise, a small company like this might get beaten down a little bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. I actually had a phone call today with somebody who's going to be on the channel a little bit later this month, and was talking about you can't just be good, you can't just have good earnings, and it
Right.
can't just be you're in the AI sector or the tech sector, and so naturally you're going to do really well. You have to be one of the top 2 or 3 to really get the kind of growth. You have to have blowout kind of earnings to
Right.
really impress. It can't just be a beat. It has to be a huge beat, or it's not going to be enough to move the market. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah, in general. I mean,
as expected results are never enough to catalyze a rally because it's already been priced in. It's always got to be better than expected. And the way that AI and tech has been going lately, especially with NVIDIA having set the bar the way that it did, we're looking for accelerating results, outperformance, strong outperformance. And because the revision trends are leading to the high end range, we really need to be well above the consensus figure to really be higher than what the market was thinking was going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to look at these companies. Well, with that, let's go to CleanSpark. Let's go to CLSK.
All right.
Well, now this is a Bitcoin miner. So
Sure.
So it sounds like whoever was looking at this is looking at that play in the Bitcoin mining area.
Right. So I looked at Mara Holdings for Bitcoins, and I like it, a little bit better than MicroStrategy because they're at least producing Bitcoins and they seem to be making some money. They've also got some exposure to like data centers
Right.
and services. So I think that's good. But for some reason, the stock is not really going anywhere. And I see that it and also was this CleanSpark. Is that right? CleanSpark have a very high short interest. So the market's really, really betting against these stocks right now. And that's not something that I want to be betting against. So like I wouldn't want to take a bullish position in a stock like this right now with such a high short interest without knowing for sure that there was some kind of a catalyst. And I don't know that there is one.
A really good point. Any other thoughts on these? There's a lot of the smaller Bitcoin companies and Bitcoin mining companies that have been making some headlines recently because they had the tremendous growth and then a big pullback. Is there money to be made in this sector? Is it a really risky sector if you're going to go in? Anything about this sector to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is money to be made, but you got to be real careful with it because it's still kind of uncertain, the future. I think that having some is important, but chasing it around, trying to chase the prices is not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, let's move on to another sector really quick. We've got just about 10 minutes left at most, so I'm going to try and cover a couple more things. We had a few people asking about D-Wave and Rigetti. I haven't checked in this week to see what these quantum computing stocks are, but these are our two favorite names, Qubits and Rigetti, and IonQ is another one. I don't think that one came up in the chart. But any thoughts on whether this is a time to be getting in on these stocks? It looks like D-Wave is down 11% in 5 days. Any buying opportunities here for these stocks? What are your thoughts in general, guys, on these quantum computing plays?
Well, they're down recently, but over the last few quarters, it looks like the markets are they've been invigorated. They're buying the stocks. It looks like there is some support in there. Both of them, though, are also showing some resistance near their highs. So without revenue and without earnings and without a change in the technological timeline, be wary of these stocks. Buy them on pullbacks, but don't expect too much upside until we get some revenue or some kind of catalyst to move them higher.
Yeah, I wrote about Rigetti last week, Bridget, and the stock hasn't done a whole lot since I wrote about it. And I agree with Thomas. The news there was their earnings report was fine. There was nothing about the earnings report that was bad. It's just the markets are realizing that commercial adoption for quantum is still years away. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen within this calendar year or next calendar year. And therefore, revenue for these companies and profit are a long time away. Again, that doesn't mean you should stay away from them. It just means you have to be a little bit careful. And when you start seeing the stock get way ahead of itself, it's probably a good time to maybe take a little bit of profit, invest some more when you get that dip, and go from there.
I think that's a good point about these stocks is I think that people got really excited about quantum computing plays because they saw that 1,700% growth in 1 year, and they're waiting for that to happen again. But like you guys both just said, it's a long ways off before we actually see that kind of growth again. These companies got popular, and there's just going to be that volatility for a while.
And some investors look at the stocks and they say that they're less than $25 or less than $20, less than $10. So they're cheap stocks, and they just can't avoid them. And that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just there's a larger story here that's going to take some time to play out.
That's
so
right.
You have to understand that going in.
Yeah. Let's get on to a name. We've got a lot of people passionate about talking about this one, and it's one that Thomas is very passionate about too. It's AMPX, Imperious Technologies. We've talked about it multiple times on the channel. I know inside knowledge here, we have an inside MarketBeat stock competition, and this was Thomas's pick, and it has not been doing well for him, right, Thomas?
Well, I mean, the timing of when the contest started, certainly I didn't get the best buying point, but I would say that I'm doing fairly well because this stock is up, triple digits since the spring. Right now, the market is setting up for another move higher. This is all being driven by its ramping production capacity. It's building its pipeline. It's got plenty of orders. We're looking for hyper growth to continue and maybe to accelerate over the next few quarters. So, really a bullish outlook. Here I've got the chart in front of me, and you can see that since the bottom was hit middle of last summer, the stock has been drifting higher, really accelerated the rally this year, but the whole time the volume's been increasing. The spike earlier this year was driven by a record high volume. All shows pretty strong support within the market for this stock. So I'm expecting it, even if I don't win the contest with it, I'm expecting it to move higher over time and produce some pretty good results.
I agree. This one has so much good potential, and you've talked about it enough that I think there's a good future here. For the record, Thomas bought in when it was the competition started around this point. So it was a hard time for the start of this competition, but it's still a very strong stock that I think by the end of the year has some potential to still get some growth for investors. So a good company to bring up in the chat here. I think we have time for just a couple more stocks before we need to move on to the next, to wrap up our conversation today. There's so many different names popping out here. It's hard to pick one. Let's talk about SoFi. This is one that's come up a few different times. So I'm just going to get that one pulled up really quick. SoFi has come up multiple times. Is this stock just continuing to see more volatility? Is that why it keeps coming up, often throughout this MarketBeat Monday?
Right. Well, it looks like it's rallying pretty strongly. We went up pretty close to new highs. So whatever volatility on a day-to-day basis, I think could possibly just be rotation within the market. We've had a really strong move in this stock, so people are taking profits. Other people are adding to their positions or starting new positions. The long-term outlook is really strong for this company. So I would expect to see the uptrend continue. Right. The next resistance point is a pretty significant one near record highs. I think if we get above that level, this stock could, it could double. It could go up to like maybe $50.
That's a big move for this stock. It's still analyst rating is, I think, an interesting one to bring up when we look at this because it's still listed as a hold by 11 analysts saying it's a hold. They're saying this is below that consensus price target. What would make this move so much higher than what analysts are anticipating?
Well, the technicals. The market is an organic beast, and when you cross certain pivot points, then it tends to move in a kind of a reflexive manner, and then to extend the move by the amount that preceded the breakout. So I can show you that on some charts sometimes. It's pretty interesting phenomenon.
Very good. Well, I think we'll end today with one last look at a stock. I want to talk about HIMS just because it's another one that's come up multiple times in the chat today.
Sure.
I know there's a lot of names we didn't get to everyone. I always wish that we could get to every single one that comes out there. And there's no rhyme or reason to what I'm picking sometime. I'm just looking at the chat and seeing which ones pop out sometimes. So I'm sorry if I've missed you. Message me, comment on some of our other videos. It's a great way to get your stock in even before MarketBeat Monday start. We also put a post out earlier in the day and ask what you want to hear about. I look at those comments too. So that's a great way to get a stock you really want covered in a little bit earlier. Again, sorry if I didn't get to the names that you're looking at. Let's get to HIMS really quick. I think there was some news with Ozempic that might be causing some moves in this chart. We saw another drop recently. This stock has been in a downtrend and then it rallied a little bit. Give you guys some time to look up what is happening with HIMS.
What I see is it looks like there was a shareholder lawsuit.
Yeah.
And right, for illegal compounding of GLP-1 drugs. Could be a negative for the stock, certainly is impacting the price action today.
Yeah.
But the recent results were pretty good, I think, despite the impact of their GLP-1 issues that they had even before this new lawsuit. Increasing user count, increasing revenue per user, deepening penetration of services, expanding verticals, really shifting from a one-stop or like a one-trick pony to a more comprehensive healthcare platform. So I think this pullback will turn into a buying opportunity, but with this new the new lawsuit, you're going to want to be careful in the near term.
I agree with Thomas. We've talked about this before. I think we even talked about it on a MarketBeat Monday not too long ago. And I mean, I think the stock's positioned well. It's in the right market for the right time. And I do think the stock got out a little bit ahead of itself. And so any negative news like this is going to have the stock get whacked pretty well. But, I think this is going to be a buy the dip opportunity at some point.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting company. It's not quite the risky biotech play, but it feels so close. It's close between a healthcare play and a biotech play because it seems so dependent on drugs, like what happens on a day-to-day with a certain medication or a certain carrying a certain product. And so that reminds me a little bit of biotech because it moves so much based on one medication at a time.
Right.
Let's talk about my favorite way to end this, and that's just talking about what you are watching the rest of the week. What can move the market the rest of this week that investors should be paying attention to?
I think.
Well, I'll start off by just saying, I'm going to be paying attention to what happens when retailers announce this week. I think Walmart comes out Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not sure. We'll also hear from Home Depot and Lowe's. So that's going to be kind of a state of the consumer play here. Let's see how the consumers are doing. And then, of course, at the end of the week, you're going to get Fed Chair Powell speaking at the Jackson Hole meeting. And that should provide clarity to what Thomas was talking about in the intro, where we'll see if he is giving a nod towards the Fed lowering in September or if he's going to hold the line and saying that's not necessary.
Yeah, it's right. I would expect whatever direction they go, the tone of his questions or where he's querying or commenting should lead the market, should kind of foreshadow what they're going to do, because he's either going to give us a hint or he's going to fish around for a reaction and see what it is that the market wants, because that's been the history. That's been the pattern over history, is when the Fed starts thinking they're going to do something, they start hinting at it with their comments and their talk, and you get a market reaction to whatever they're saying, and then down the road, that tends to be what happens.
Yeah, he doesn't like to surprise the market, and so he's probably going to make sure that whatever he says on Friday will ensure that the market's not surprised by what happens in September. But that could be a negative surprise for the market as well.
Good information and good thing to watch out for. Again, that Jackson Hole meeting definitely could have some market moves happening for us this week. So thank you for bringing that to our attention and for going over a lot of these cold reads on these stocks, guys. I so appreciate you taking the time to do this every Monday. And thank you to the viewers who tuned in to join us. We so appreciate you joining and letting us know the stocks that you care about and want to know more about. If we didn't hit on them today, they might be names that pop up sometime throughout the week in our videos that are posted every day here on MarketBeat. Thanks for joining us and for being a part of our community, everyone. As always, happy investing.